Hello, my name is Olga, and this is our channel about supply chain last mile innovations. And today, together with my co founder and COO at Via.Delivery, Jeff Masek, we have a very special guest, Arik Levy. Arik is a founder at Luxer One and general partner at Luxer One Ventures. Arik, thank you for coming. Thank you for taking your time.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you guys.
Yeah, so I'll start with my questions. Could you please tell a little bit about yourself, your career, and especially about the early days and the various locker use cases you've tested?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me on the show. I'm always excited to talk about lockers and Via.Delivery is doing some great stuff out there. So I've been in the locker industry for I think over 20 years now. I started my career with my first my locker career. My first company was Laundry Locker, and so in San Francisco, I could never get my dry cleaning done. I would literally work. I'd leave my house at 6 in the morning. I'd get home at 7 o'clock at night, and I could never get my laundry or my dry cleaning done. And there was actually a dry cleaner in my apartment building, so I'd leave my stuff outside my door. They would come pick it up, clean it, put it back. It worked pretty well, but I was never comfortable leaving all my clothes out there. And so I said, hey, if there was a locker in my apartment building, this would be amazing. And that's how Laundry Locker was born. We grew to become the largest dry cleaner in San Francisco. And then the software that we built for Laundry Locker, we licensed all over the globe. I think we had 75, 80 different customers in like 30 different countries. The largest dry cleaners in the world were using our software. And that was a great business. Really enjoyed it. We were having a lot of fun, but clearly saw the opportunity. And there was a lot of our customers, drop locker customers, who were out there selling lockers into apartment buildings. And everybody, the feedback just kept coming at us like, hey, we need help solving the package problem. How can we use our lockers to solve the package problem? You know, these buildings used to get 4 or 5 packages a day. Amazon started taking off. They're getting 50, 100 packages a day. I mean, now we see properties getting over 1,000 packages a day. And lockers were an amazing way to solve that problem. And so started that business in 2014, and Luxer One just really took off. We ended up selling it in 2018, end of 2018 to Assa Abloy. I'm still involved there working with some of our new projects and really in an advisory role. And I've since started a venture fund called Luxer One Ventures, where we invest in all kinds of companies that are helping lockers work better, like Via.Delivery, or companies that are using lockers for different use cases, whether it be lockers at festivals or medical device or medical medicines that are being distributed through lockers, product placement happening through lockers, advertising on lockers, all kinds of really exciting things to really bring the locker industry forward and make lockers much more a part of everybody's daily rituals.
Really cool. Really cool. I got a question. So I was trying to connect the dots, right, between the dry cleaning piece and then going into lockers. So was it the software that was the catalyst for you for both? Is that software, if you will, has that migrated forward, or was it you saw this opportunity for the locker hardware piece, if you will, in to be able to play a role in other things that were going on?
Yeah, when I started the Laundry Locker back in 2005, people were just getting internet in their home. The iPhone wasn't around. Our drivers, we started using Palm Pilots, and they had internet connectivity. And so one of the first pieces of software we built was a function on the Palm Pilot. So when they were in front of a locker, they could check the order in so that when they got back into the office, we could process it quicker. So the Laundry Locker was built in a day when there's no way you could deploy smart lockers. You didn't have internet at the locations. Power was difficult to come by. We kind of deployed these dumb lockers with a little keypad on them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when Luxer One came around 2014, 15, it was much easier to get connectivity in the apartment buildings, which allowed us to deploy smart lockers. So the technology between the two is vastly different, really, and evolved based on where it is, and up to our new generation locker Harbor, where actually we've kind of gone back to putting the intelligence back onto the the handheld device and removed a lot of that intelligence from the locker, because managing tens of thousands of smart devices out there that are in essence running a computer becomes challenging. And so how do we make that as simple as possible by making the technology in those lockers as simple as possible? Is sort of where the industry is evolving now.
Great.
Could you please tell us about Luxer One business model and what it now focuses on?
Yeah, so Luxer One, like I said, it kind of started with the need to solve the package problem in apartment buildings. So, properties, as the package volume grew, they would literally hire full-time staff whose job it was to receive all the packages in, log them all, notify the resident that they have a package. Resident comes down, they've got to go find the package in the storage room and give it to the resident. And so you can imagine, you're hiring people $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year just to manage packages in these apartment buildings. And so Luxer One would come in and really, take that whole burden off of the property, manage it, automate it. And so typically we'd sell them the hardware. The typical model is you sell them the hardware, and then there's an ongoing service fee to manage and support the lockers. We offer lockers in all different types of models where they can just pay a monthly fee, they can lease them. We now augment those services with on-site staff for real, some of these buildings, they're getting 1,000 plus deliveries a day. They want more of the concierge feeling. We can combine on-site lockers with on-site personnel and all different types of things. But yeah, the typical model in apartment buildings for Luxer One is that they pay for the lockers and then they pay a service fee. Harbor, which is the next business model for Luxer One and what we're working hard on is a model where, we got a purchase by Asa Abloy. We now have the means to be able to go out and deploy lockers. And it's always been my vision is how do we monetize these lockers every time they're used? How do we own the lockers and the infrastructure? How do we become a landlord, in essence, in charge every time someone wants to use the lockers? And I wish that model existed for us, back in the laundry locker days. And because deploying lockers, managing lockers, building lockers, purchasing lockers, supporting lockers is very expensive and difficult. Most companies that build solutions, they just want to use the locker as a mechanism for pickup and drop off. They don't want to get into the whole locker space. And I think by us building that infrastructure that anybody can layer on top of, it's going to encourage a lot of entrepreneurs to come out and build solutions. It's going to encourage a lot of large companies that are out there to leverage these locker networks, because a lot of the challenges in the past has been, we can't get funding. We're not a locker business. We don't want to be deploying lockers. We don't want to manage lockers. How do we procure locations? And so with Harbor, we solve all that for entrepreneurs and existing businesses who want to leverage lockers for that, incredible asynchronous transaction where they drop stuff off or pick stuff up at their convenience, and the consumer is able to pick stuff up and drop it off at their convenience.
Yep.
And how many lockers and types of lockers has Luxer One deployed in the US?
I think the number is something like 12,000 locations. So, a location may have a bunch of locker towers and then, compartments within them. So, well over 100,000 compartments, and I think it's somewhere around 12,000. Don't quote me on that one because I don't know the exact numbers for Luxer these days, because they install hundreds of lockers a month right now.
And Arik, is a lot of that or most of that in these office buildings, in these apartment buildings, at least currently today, with obviously the desire now to move towards these sort of, I'll call them open locker networks that are now going to be used, if you will, and seen by, customers that are available pretty much anywhere in the US and carriers as well?
Yeah, we definitely cut our teeth in the multifamily space, and it's definitely a significant part of the business over at Luxer One. But there's been a lot of expansion into other verticals. Retail is a big one. If you go into any Home Depot, Best Buy, you'll see lockers in there. UPS store has deployed lockers. They're in office buildings. There's public lockers in stadiums and public parking lots and all kinds of different locations. So we've started to see municipalities are really embracing lockers. There's a lot of lockers being used in corporations and in the back office for different processes. So, we've seen a lot of different adoption of lockers in different use cases. Although today I'd say, the majority of Luxer One's installs are still in the multifamily space, but that is changing as other industries adopt lockers.
Got it. Great.
Are there any other trends you are seeing in the locker business apart from what you just said?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to me to see a lot of these niche use cases. If Outside Lands was in San Francisco last weekend, if you go there, I mean, they had something like 1,000 locker towers. I mean, over 1,000 compartments being used. So all the festivals are using these. I alluded to medical industry using them to manage like narcotics and controlled substances within medical centers is a fun one. Food lockers to manage the transactions happening with DoorDash and food delivery and such. So you're really seeing lockers being used for all these different use cases because they make so much sense. They make the processes so much smoother. But there's a lot of challenges from an integration perspective and from changing the way people work and how the way they're used to doing things. I mean, even back in the laundry locker days, once you used it, you're like, this is the best thing ever. I mean, I don't have to drive to the dry cleaner anymore. It's, I just go pick it up in the locker downstairs. It's super convenient, but getting consumers to try it the first time was always the biggest challenge.
You bring up an interesting sort of segue, and one of the questions that I actually wanted to ask, which is what are you seeing out there in terms of enhancements in lockers? Things that, I mean, obviously you just mentioned food and otherwise, which means, there needs to be some level of, cooling or refrigeration, et cetera. But what's going on out there? What's exciting to you in terms of, new attributes, that you guys are thinking about deploying in these locker banks?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of evolutions kind of on the hardware side. I mean, the primary one where you're seeing everybody move to is how do you get rid of the power requirements, right? I mean, having to plug lockers in, which has traditionally been the model, is very difficult when it comes to procuring locations. So, you procure a location like, great, we'd love a locker here. You're like, oh, okay, we have to run power. Well, there's not power there. So now we need to get the electrician out. So getting away from power is where almost all the locker companies are going to battery operated and solar operated solutions. So that's a big part of the lockers. Mobility, easily being able to pick them up and drop them off and deploy them or move them if they're at an underperforming location or add to an overperforming location. I think creating lockers that are much more mobile. You see, some of these, we talked about festivals where, they pop up and then pop down, or pop-up shows or farmers markets or things like that, where lockers make a lot of sense, but you need to be able to quickly deploy them and redeploy them. Flat packed lockers, right? How do we ship lockers and shipping lockers and logistics of delivering to the locations and them not getting damaged has always been one of the big challenges of lockers. So how do you flat pack lockers? How do you make the aesthetics of lockers a lot more exciting? We're working with a company called Brightly, where they're able to take the doors off of a locker and replace them with screens, so you can do full advertising on the screens, where you can point to different direct the consumer to where you can pick it up. Charging RFID in the lockers, so you're able to sense what's in the locker. Is a specific thing in there, or has it been removed? So I mean, those are some of the newer solutions that we're seeing in lockers. And in small compartments, that's always been a big challenge, to design a locker that's got a lot of small compartments, generally because most lockers need some type of manual override, and it becomes really hard when you start stacking those lockers together. So some real innovations in that space as well.
Well, because we talk on occasion that we're doing quite a bit in the wine space, right?
Yeah.
And curious from your perspective on just identification, whether it be presenting, if you will, driver's license or something, if you will, at the kiosks for verification purposes to open the door and such. But You may already have some technology there already where there's requirements that are stringent like that, but what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, what you're where that conversation heads real quickly is carrier integration, right? And how do you get, it's not the technology to verify that, Jeff Mack is actually the one at the locker picking it up and he's over 21. So we're going to pop open the locker, like that exists. We can do that, using AI tools to look at your ID and scan that and then look at your face, or we can use, connect you real time to a person who can do that age verification. But you've got to get the carriers on board doing it, and as you're well familiar, Jeff, with the carriers. Yeah. The carriers look at everything just from a scale perspective, and they're like, well, we're delivering 50 billion packages a year. How many packages do wine make up? It's not really worth us spending the engineering time to check that box for you, Jeff. Sorry about that. So that's really it's not a technology challenge at all. It's the fact that the U.S. we have two main, three carriers if you involve the USPS, and then you have Amazon who's kind of doing their own thing, and they're such big companies and they operate at such large scale that it's really hard to get them to embrace new technology and new solutions. Because if they tried to embrace all of them, I mean, these guys, every day someone's knocking on their door with something new that they want them to do. Whereas in Europe, you see a lot more adoption of lockers, a lot more innovative solutions. But they're delivering, their whole country is smaller than Rhode Island, right? So, I mean, it's like, yeah, if we just had an operator in Rhode Island and we want to do some cool stuff with them, you can make that happen. But trying to service the entire United States, it becomes a challenge for us to push the boundaries with these guys.
Got it.
Do you feel that lockers will grow in the US, and which segments represent the largest opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen incredible growth in the US with lockers. I mean, it happens to me almost on a daily basis when I'm out there talking to people. I mean, if you ask somebody if they've used a smart parcel locker, they'll say Amazon, or if they live in an apartment building, they'll say Luxer One or one of our competitors. So I mean, the market penetration of lockers, just in my anecdotal experience, is somewhere around 50% of people, at least in the right demographic, have had some exposure to lockers. Mm-hmm. But that being said, I mean, we're seeing them grow everywhere. So package, picking up and delivering packages has by far been the most used use case when it comes to lockers, especially in with Amazon, FedEx, and UPS, all of them really embracing lockers. But you're starting to see them everywhere. If you go to most sporting events, there's lockers for bag drop, right? I mean, you can't bring your backpack into a sporting event anymore. There's you have your knife on you or something like that. It's like, oh, you got to check it into a locker. We've seen them at the airports for years. They kind of got pulled out with 9/11, but they're starting to pop back up there in office buildings. So yeah, I mean, I just think we're at the infancy of lockers. If you go to other countries, you see them everywhere, especially public lockers. Most of the lockers that we have in the U.S. today, except for Amazon lockers, are private. They're behind the door. They're either in an apartment building or inside a retailer or inside an office building. We haven't seen that proliferation of public lockers, but it's coming. I can guarantee it. We will see lockers on every street corner in the next 5 years here in the U.S. There's just so many use cases and companies that are figuring out ways to make that business model work.
We heard it here first.
There you go.
Love it.
Open locker network are a new concept in the US. Do you think that the most carriers will participate?
Yeah, so there's a term called open locker network, and I think it's important to sort of define these terms, and people have sort of tried to define them. So, most people define an open locker network as a locker that accepts deliveries from multiple carriers, and it's still very package and carrier centric. That is one model that exists. I think what we're more focused on is a locker platform that anybody can use for anything. And so much more use cases than just parcel delivery, because parcel delivery is controlled by, you know, 2 or 3 companies here, 4 companies in the US. And so, you know, you're trying to land a whale and reshape an industry that's going to be very difficult. For us, we see a lot of opportunity in these other use cases. And, you know, if the carriers come on board and UPS and FedEx and Amazon want to start using these public lockers, and we call them just, you know, a public locker, and that public locker can be used for anything. So anybody who implements the SDK that lets you talk to that locker can pop it open. It's just like, you know, the iPhone, right? Everybody thought phones were for making calls, and you know, maybe you had your calendar on there, and then, oh wow, I could do email. Boy, what else would people want to do on these lockers? Well, it turns out, you know, yes, I answer phone calls and I do my email and I check my calendar on my phone, but I also have 20 other different apps that I use on a daily basis that to some extent are more important in my daily life than those core features and functionalities. So while package delivery and lockers make a lot of sense, I believe that lockers will be used primarily for other use cases than that. I mean, if you look at food delivery in apartment buildings, you know, we see, we've invested in a company called Minnow, which does food lockers, and the volume they see is almost equal to the volume that we see of packages being delivered vis-a-vis food being delivered into apartment buildings. So I think there's so many different use cases. So to us, an open locker network, which has traditionally really been defined as a locker that could be used by multiple carriers, is interesting. I think it makes no sense to have multiple, you know, a UPS locker and a FedEx locker and an Amazon locker at one location. But not only would I like to see that one locker being used by all those carriers, I'd also like to see people going there and, you know, dropping off their Facebook Marketplace item that they sold so that someone could come pick it up, putting a, you know, a laptop in there, and then a company coming and packaging it up and shipping it out. Every time I go there and I pick up a parcel, I get a free sample of the, you know, liquid death or some type of new feature that someone's trying to sell me. So I feel like these lockers can be a hub of commerce of all different types of things happening in them, vis-a-vis just parcel delivery.
Yeah, very cool.
Why do you think the US is lagging behind with this concept? Being originally from Russia, I'm very surprised because lockers are there forever already.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at anywhere besides the US, lockers are still, as far as I know, like, well, I'd say, okay, besides Vinted, maybe, you know, 90% being used for parcel delivery, 95% being used for parcel delivery. I'm not an expert on the European market, so I might misspeak here a little bit, but in the US, everybody can get a package delivered to their door, to their address. And Amazon has made that free. Zero shipping, delivered to your home door. In Europe, that's not the way it works. If I want to have a package delivered, I'm going to pay a delivery fee. If I want it delivered to my door, I pay a high delivery fee, or they can deliver it to a locker for very inexpensively. So the market dynamics, in essence, what Amazon's done with free shipping, and that really only exists in the US, is what has caused, you know, and Amazon's been very, very successful with their lockers, and they've made a lot of pushes to push people to their lockers because they realize the economics are much better for them to have a parcel delivered to a locker as opposed to delivering to their home. UPS and FedEx have tried lockers, tried to do it on their own, have realized the challenges with managing locker networks, have realized it makes no sense to have a UPS locker next to a FedEx locker next to an Amazon locker. And when I order something online, I don't care who the carrier is, right? The person that chooses the carrier is the company I order from, generally. Sometimes the consumer chooses it, but, you know, 99% of the time they're choosing it based on price if you show them the different options. So when I go on to Nike.com and I place an order, it might show up at the UPS as my UPS access point. And then FedEx, it might show up at a Walgreens. So I don't know what their alternative delivery addresses are. I want to always go to the Safeway that's down the street from me, and that's where I want to pick up everything. So, you know, the U.S. industry hasn't moved that way, and it's been very frustrating because there's such significant cost savings for the carriers, but the carriers have not been willing to share in that cost saving. Because when we started Luxer One, our first conversations with these buildings that were getting 1,000 packages a day or hundreds of packages a day. I mean, they're like, listen, this is a huge problem, but this should not be our problem. Why do we have to pay to go put in place a locker to solve FedEx and UPS's problem? This is their problem. And so we went and knocked on the door and said, listen, these properties are going to stop accepting packages. We'll put a locker in there and work with you guys. All we need you to do is pay us a couple pennies per delivery.
Yep.
And that model works beautifully. Let us put free lockers out there. Give us let us share in your cost savings, because your cost savings are so significant. And all we need to proliferate lockers everywhere is a small share of those cost savings. That hasn't resonated. And for the last 10 years, we have that conversation, constantly with the carriers. And I still don't see it changing anytime soon, which is why we've pivoted and changed and said, you know what? We're going to go after other opportunities for the lockers, and maybe the carriers will come on board, or maybe some fifth carrier will come out of the blue that does locker delivery and can, bring everybody's delivery costs down 25%. And so, when they go to Nike and say, we can save you 25%, just needs to be delivered to lockers, which is actually similar. It's almost exactly what Via.Delivery is doing, using access points, which, access points and lockers kind of work pretty well together to fill out a network. That hopefully that becomes a really compelling story, and a fifth carrier comes up, or the carriers are forced to evolve as being a great way for them to reduce their shipping expenses.
And my last question, anything to add about the relationship between Luxer One and Via.Delivery and how we can enhance it?
Yeah, I mean, my vision, full disclosure, Locker One Ventures is an investor in Via.Delivery. And, the reason we invested is that part of in order to have parcels delivered to a locker, the consumer needs to select an alternative delivery address. So in the checkout process, when they're on Nike.com, they can just say, deliver it to my house, or deliver it to an alternative delivery address. And, those can be UPS access points. They can be FedEx delivery spots. They can be, a Walgreens. They can be a convenience store that's a third-party network, or they can be a locker. And so, I can guarantee, well, it's happening today, that lockers are popping up on the Via.Delivery drop-down box as delivery locations, right? We need to make that operationally be a lot more efficient, be cheaper, be the cheapest option that's out there, right? Because it's an unstaffed location. I mean, theoretically, the cheapest delivery that you should be able to get is to a locker. And so, unfortunately, price is the primary driver that the consumer is looking at. For some people, it's convenience. It's the fact that a locker is available 24/7 in most cases. But yeah, I mean, that's the relationship between Luxer and Via.Delivery, is how do we get our public locker locations to show up, and how do we get Via.Delivery integrated into the checkout process of all of these retailers, so that lockers become an easy alternative delivery address for people.
Yeah, and to your point, we've seen it with some testing that we've done with lockers being presented, that there are customers, by the way, even at similar price points, but there are customers that would prefer to go 24/7 access, unattended, than to walk into a store location, potentially have to stand on a POS line, or over, near a photo shop or whatever, and have to engage. That's just the reality, if you will, of how people want to interact. So
yeah, and Amazon doesn't release their numbers on their locker utilization, but if you go and try to use a locker, you will notice that many of them are full, and their utilization is very, very high on those lockers. So they know that it reduced their costs. They know that consumers want it for whatever reason it is that they want it, and they encourage people to use them because it's the cheapest way for them to make their deliveries. So yeah.
I was in Dallas this past weekend, saw a bank, very significant bank, on the side of a 7-Eleven. Amazon, of course, and
Yeah.
it was active. It was definitely
Oh, yeah.
active. So, yeah, so that's great. So, anything else, Olga?
No, I'm good. Thank you so much for your time. It was very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Eric,
wonderful talking with you guys.
yeah, we want to thank you again for everything. We love the guidance. We love the participation. I share with you the sentiment about the carrier base in the U.S. needing to not necessarily think about it always being a revenue generator, but it being something that can create, more efficiencies, better economics, if you will, for both them and for the consumer and for companies like yourself. So we're on this journey together.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun couple of years here. The
It will.
industry's gonna change. It's just a question of when and how. So
Totally. Totally.
and who owns it, right? So hopefully it's the two of us here. So
Nope.
that's fine.
Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you.